to Dr. Nyesha Black, who is the Director of Socioeconomic Analysis and Demographics at the Culverhouse College of Business at the University of Alabama. And then afterwards, please stay for closing remarks. And without further ado, we have Dr. Black, who is going to again present. If I'm not mistaken, she presented last year, and we are really looking forward to seeing how things have changed over this last year with COVID. So thank you very much, Dr. Black, for your time, and thank you.
Thank you for that introduction. Again, my name is Nyesha Black. I'm currently at the University of Alabama, and it seems like every year we give an update of the county business patterns data, and so I will be doing the same today. It likely will not take the entire 30 minutes, so you'll be able to reclaim some of your time. So I will review some of the update of that data and then ask a request of you based off of the gaps in the data and just the landscape of data collection on micro businesses across the country. So one of the things that we pull from as at our center is a lot of the census data. We have two teams. We have the economic forecasting team and the social economic team. I lead the social economic team. And we are also the liaison between the federal government and the state of Alabama. And so we get some access that the public doesn't get to the census, but as you know, like a lot of the census data is quite dated. So unfortunately, due to that lag time, the latest data that we have to capture the trends of businesses in the state of Alabama and in the country as a whole goes back to 2019. Despite that, I think it still gives us some clues about the state of business, particularly micro businesses and others in the state. So just to give you a sense of the quantifiable data, there are more than 7.9 million businesses in the United States, according to the census. And that absolute change was over 50,000. But when you account for, just the relative sense, that percentage change is less than 1%. For the state of Alabama, here you see that we are on par with the national average. Our absolute change increased by 895 businesses, but again, less than 1% growth. Of course, that varies greatly across types of businesses. So for micro businesses, which are classified as 4 employees or fewer, in the state of Alabama, we have a little bit over 49,000, which was a 156 increase in firms since 2008. Again, that's less than a 1% growth. So it is comparable to the overall growth in businesses and comparable to the national average. And about 50% or 49% actually of all firms in Alabama are considered micro businesses. However, we are about 5 percentage points less than the national average, and that may not sound like a lot. However, that means that we would have more than 54,000 businesses if we were on par with the national average. And so that means we are missing almost 5,500 micro businesses. And so I think that gives the state of Alabama and important stakeholders a metric or room of where they need to grow. Before the pandemic, that number captures the change before the pandemic. And so, of course, when we get the 2020 data next year, what we will be looking for is how did micro businesses face the burden of the trifecta of economic shocks that happened during the pandemic, right? Because you had both like a financial shock, the economic shock and the public health shock. So were people, responding by entering, or if they were laid off by, becoming entrepreneurs or having smaller firms, that the places that were 5 to 9 employees decreased to a micro business, or are we seeing just an overall decline? So there'll be a lot of things that we can look for to understand what is the nature of that change. In the meantime, I think that a lot of the information comes anecdotally. And for people who do this work, I think that oftentimes we value the quantitative data more than doing the qualitative work. So there's nothing wrong with like just taking a subsample of businesses and talking to them in person and ask them, how did they respond to these certain things when we need a sense of what are, some of the more immediate responses before the data is released quantitatively. The other thing I want to point out, though, is given the marginal or the relative average change in micro businesses from 2008 in the state of Alabama, 2018, in the state of Alabama, we have had a substantial increase relative to the national average in businesses that have more than 100 employees. And that is particularly captured in the 500 to 999, as well as in the 1,000 or more. And what I think is happening here is that as Alabama continues to become like a hub for the auto industry, as well as some of the growth that we've seen in places such as Huntsville, and also in some places in Birmingham with logistics companies, as well as Mobile with logistics company, that we're seeing an increase of large employers in the state of Alabama, and that's what's being captured there. One of the things I also wanted to take a look at was where are the absolute number of businesses. And so not surprisingly, this is comparable to what we see as population, right? We know that the largest county in the state of Alabama is Jefferson County. So that's where you're also going to have the most amount of micro businesses. So there are more than 7,800 alone located in Jefferson County. And so 47.5% of those businesses in all are micro businesses. And so these other counties that are listed here are, also some of the largest counties in the state. And then not surprisingly, where you see the lower amount of micro businesses is also tied to the counties that have smaller populations. So therefore, when we look at a percentage rank, we see that actually the smaller counties, as far as population size for the state of Alabama, such as Coosa County, Geneva County, Greene and Sumter County, which are in the Black Belt, that micro businesses are really the backbone of the economy in those counties. Like if you look at Coosa County alone, 66 of the 95 total firms in that county are micro businesses. So where there may or likely challenges with the economy in those areas, people are responding with, creating their own businesses, and they can, and I think that's also from a policy perspective where the state can buttress support for those sorts of businesses, especially as larger industries continue to leave certain areas of the state, especially those that are not along the I-65 corridor or the I-2059 corridor. This is something that the state of Alabama could help support, and as well as other stakeholders, such as Amen. So again, some of the rank as far as the bottom 10 in the percentage rank of micro businesses, which are less than the national average and the state average, and no one in the bottom 10 had more than 50% of the total businesses as a percentage of the total of micro businesses. So this is where there's some gaps can also be filled in when they're as far as like having more support and resources on the ground, because not all of these counties are necessarily your larger counties. Etowah County, which is where Gaston is located, they've had some economic changes with some of their larger plants closing. And so again, supporting micro businesses can be a way in which they can kind of fill in those gaps. So when we look at the micro businesses by trade and by rank, we see that retail trade makes up the largest numerical total of micro businesses in the state of Alabama. And that has grown, again, not very much, but by 1.4% from the previous year. But we've also seen some declines in some of the other industries, particularly what's classified as other services, and that can include personal care services, maintenance and repair, religious and civic organizations. So it's really everything that doesn't just fit in those other categories. And also declines in professional and scientific technical services, healthcare and social assistance services, as well as wholesale trade. And also, particularly in the rural areas, there has been some pressure in the healthcare policy space around hospitals and smaller clinics closing. And so like some of the smaller clinics that may have supported those hospitals may be accounting for this change that we see in the healthcare and social assistance area. So again, when we look at the number of paid employees, although Alabama's micro businesses make up 49% of total firms, as far as paid employees, they make up a little more than 5%. However, their economic impact should not be negated, although it only makes up 5.2% of the $76 billion that isn't generated via payroll for the state of Alabama. They make up 3.9 billion in total payroll from the 2019 data, and I expect that to continue to increase when we get the 2020 data as well as the 2021 data. So one of the frustrations with looking for data specifically with micro businesses is, quite frankly, there's not a lot. And so I think that the responsibility is on us as stakeholders who's interested in this issue, is to collect this data ourselves and to be very creative in doing so. But one of the things that we've had in-house at CBER for quite a while now is the Alabama Business Confidence Index. And so I think this is a great opportunity to solicit participation, because one of the things that we could begin to do is to categorize, businesses that by employment size within that survey. And in order to do that and to have some statistically sound results and confidence in reporting that data, is that we need more entries from people as panelists in that data. So one of the things that you can do, I hope that you can still see my screen here, is that you can simply Google ABCI. So that's A as in Alpha, B as in Boy, C as in Charlie, I as in Indigo, Alabama or CBER. And if you are a small business, or if you work with small businesses, is to simply enroll as a new panelist. And what CBER does, I have a team member on my staff. She's an senior economic analyst, Susanna Robichaud. She does an outstanding job of collecting quarterly data on the confidence of businesses throughout the state of Alabama. And so this index has been shown to be very correlated with the national numbers that get released, that in our data comes out before the national numbers, as much as I believe 6 months in advance of that. But there are other opportunities for us to capture or to ask different types of questions related to that data. For example, we're able to see that the Alabama economy, the businesses throughout the state on average are very favorable and for Q3, and this was data that was captured last quarter. And the Q3 panel actually just closed yesterday. And so we would collect one more to round out the year. But if we were able to get access to micro businesses to join, we will also be able to clearly be able to pull and say how micro businesses are feeling about the economic context of both the state as well as the country. And we would be able to capture information about how they feel about sales and profits. So you see the way that this is categorized here, that businesses overall was extremely confident about Alabama's economy. And they were more confident about Alabama's economy than the US economy, but it was still high. And that as far as industry sales, panelists throughout the state are still expecting sales to grow in the third quarter compared with Q2 2021. And business leaders are feeling very confident, forecasting increased profits, and they expect to continue to hire. So, and then finally, the industry's capital expenditures were positive. So that data, again, that was captured last quarter. And it's very rare to get data, you know, that's a snapshot in close in proximity to time. And so one of the ways we can fill the gap in the lag of data that's available from the census is to simply capture our own. So I would strongly encourage you to get your partners in the businesses that you work with to participate in this very local and very informative business confidence data. That is all I have for this morning. Not quite noon yet, but I will be open to questions.
I am checking the Q&A. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to go ahead and type it into the Q&A, or go ahead and raise your hand in the attendees, if you're one of the attendees, and you'll be recognized so you can ask a question.
Dr. Vaughn, there is one in the Q&A.
Okay, maybe, oh, okay. I'm sorry, it didn't scroll down for me. Dr. Black, would you like me to read the question for you, or can you access it on your end?
I don't see the question, so if you could read it for me, that would be great.
Yes, ma'am, certainly. The first question was entered at 11:42 by Dr. Walter Hill. His question is, please explain why few Black Belt counties have low numbers of both micro and larger enterprises, with a few exceptions.
I don't know. I would be open to a discussion of why people who are in those counties intimately may have to lend to that. My first inclination is likely, as far as the large businesses. I think that the state of Alabama has invested over the last 20 years of businesses along the corridor. And so I think it's a geography issue. I think that counties that are not in the center of the state and that don't run, and thus like we have these 4 quadrants, the way that the interstate is broken up of the state, in the state. So you have like Northwest Alabama, Northeast, and so on and so forth. So those that are not running along that interstate in that quadrant, they have definitely not been able to benefit from some of the economic boom that we've received from selected industries. So I think that can be one answer, but I'm sure there's more nuance there.
Without a doubt, there surely would be more nuance there. We have one other question that's in the chat. I'm sorry, we have one other question that's in the Q&A, and then there's one question that just came into the chat. I'm going to go ahead and read the question that is in the Q&A, but I will put a pin on the one that's on the chat right after it. But the question was submitted by an anonymous attendee, and the question is, what kind of businesses are considered micro businesses?
So the definition there is very simple: a business that has 4 employees or fewer. So that can be a one with 1 employee or up to 4. So you're talking about your mom and pop type of shops, just your non-large retail stores, since that was a bit sector that was represented among micro businesses. So yeah, that's a very simple one.
Okay. Okay, and the question that was submitted in the chat, the question, I'll just read it verbatim. What is the percentage in the demographic of age 50 plus Black business owners?
So we would have to create an estimate of that, because there is no data collection on age of business owners and then broken down by race at the national level. And thus we don't get that data at the state level. So what we would have to do is come up with the population estimate of the Black population for the state of Alabama, which is roughly like 26, 27%. Maybe with the way the census was recently changed, it may be 25 point something%, but nevertheless, and look at the percentage of Black business owners and then break it down by age. But is nothing that has been collected into any type of survey. That's not a question that is asked.
Okay, the same commenter said population estimate of the state, percentage of Black business owners. Thank you, great info. And yes, the stated percentage of population that's African American is somewhere around a quarter.
Mm-hmm. That recently changed because the census now allows for people to mark up to 5 racial groups. So when we look at Black alone, it's about a quarter, but it increases a little bit once you account for Black in addition to another race.
Okay, excellent. Would you have any idea on trends age-wise with African-American business owners, even through some other data sources, say other than the government or census? Or
I have not seen any studies that have collected primary data on that. Again, that goes back to kind of the gap in the data. There's still a lot that needs to be asked, and a support around understanding what Black business owners look like throughout the country and with the state.
Okay. All right, well, I'm going to check the Q&A one more time. I think okay, so there's one more question that came in. It says, what can the Alabama Micro Enterprise Network do to assist the Black Belt area to increase microbusinesses with all that has been shared over the last 2 days. I'm not sure if that is more targeted towards that organization, and I believe there probably is representative in the attendees. If she or he could raise their hand, perhaps our technology people could move you over to address that question
Well, while we wait on those others, one of the things that, I thought through when I was looking at the data again, what pointed out to me was the percentage of micro businesses in some of those counties that I featured that were in the top 10. And so if those counties, due to population size, if most of their customers are not where they live, then they need to have really good infrastructure. So that means like your broadband internet access is going to be very critical to those types of businesses. And also, great infrastructure that's more physical with, road networks to make sure that they're properly maintained. But I think the broadband internet access in today's context is huge. And you will be surprised when we do focus group data, how many of our rural communities still do not have access to, even proper cell phone service, and which is tied to also the broadband access. So from a policy point of view, that's something that, can be supported on the ground.
So this is Gaynell Jackson again, and I spoke yesterday as the president of the Alabama Micro Enterprise Network. And I think looking at the question, not just specifically to us, but what can organizations in general do to support what's happening in the Black Belt? I think the young lady that spoke from the Black Belt Foundation yesterday, I think all of us have to be very intentional about what happens. And we have to realize that what happens in urban Alabama, what we take for granted that happens in urban Alabama probably does not come near happening in the rural side. I think we've been sort of intentional about it. We have several people on our board that are in the Black Belt. So we've been really talking about what we can do. But I think we all have to make what happens in the Black Belt a priority, because that's an area where, like, we take Wi-Fi for granted. And they don't have it, they don't have it, or they don't have it. It's not consistent enough that everybody can use it. So it puts our children at risk when they're in school, it puts our businesses at risk in terms of how they market, how people contact them. I just think we have to be conscious of what's happening in the Black Belt. And then we have to be intentional about making sure that we are doing our part to lift up and raise up the issues and the people and the organizations on the ground that are trying to make it work.
Okay, thank you. We do actually have 3 more questions that have come in. If we can take a bit of time and address those. I know that we're at the end of the program, so if you're in the audience, please bear with us. We're trying to get to these, and if we're not able to get to them, definitely they will be addressed to whom it would be appropriate, and those responses will be gotten back to you, as with any other questions that were asked during the session. But this question came from a Chris Spencer of the BBCF, presumably the Black Belt Community Foundation. Where will I go to find a list of registered businesses in the Black Belt? There are lots, typo, of painters, construction companies, beauty salons across the Black Belt.
There is, I cannot think of, I think it's the National Minority Business Council, and they do have a regional, network. So if businesses are registered with them, they may be the first place to look to see if they have a directory. I don't know, I know that we have access to data here as far as Duns and Bradstreet, where we can look to see where the names of businesses throughout in certain counties, for example, but it won't tell us whether they're minority owned. So that's a way that we can kind of gather information and then, you know, do some deeper search from there. Another thing that we can use as a clue is that when the PPP loan data was released by the SBA, and that data was released by the work of journalists who filed like a Sunshine Freedom of Information Act, rather. One of the things that later people wanted to make sure is that that money was being distributed equitably. And so the banks did ask about gender and race as well as veteran status. So those are 3 important demographic variables. And so that database does show the name of the business, where the business is located. And for some of the businesses, there is a race variable. So that's also a way that a directory can be somewhat created. It won't be comprehensive, it won't be perfect, but it's a place to start as far as building a directory of Black-owned businesses that are in the state and specifically in the Black Belt.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Black. There were 2 more questions, and I think we're going to try to wrap it up. I see that there's one question in the chat, and I'll swing back around to that. But the first question, I think, related to the last question that was asked of you, or question before last, and it says, what barriers are there to getting this data? And I would presume that was data for age on Black-owned businesses, which I think you did address, Dr. Black. But if you wanted to add, you may. And then the second question is, what percentage of Black businesses presumably is in the e-commerce space, and how much is that going to be promoted pandemic and post? If you'd like to address
Again,
those.
we don't have that information. Those are really great questions. Again, I think that, you know, we will have to push, you know, people who are collecting the data at the national level to ask those sorts of questions. Or we would have to seek some type of support or funding to delve into those sorts of questions. So, you know, if there is our office would be grateful to work with someone with as far as applying for some type of funding to ask those questions right here in the state of Alabama and do some type of data collection on that. But unfortunately, that data does not exist right now.
Okay, thank you so much. All right. I know that there are a couple other questions, but we are a little bit over time. We have a number of closing remarks. Also, the evaluation link has been placed in the chat. And without further ado, we have Dr. Gary Walton, Dr. Raymon Shange, and Dean of the College of Agriculture, Dr. Walter Hill, who will be giving closing remarks, and then we will close.
Greetings. I'd like to thank all of you for attending. My name is Gary Walton. I am the chairman of the Booker T. Washington Summit. Some of you might have already seen in the chat. My mom has already let you all know. I want to thank her for her support always. But I also wanted to make sure that I thank everyone who has attended, everybody who was a part of the summit and who has made it special. I want to make sure that I take the time to thank President Morris. She extended her time for a cabinet meeting to be able to be here and give us a welcome. I want to make sure we thank the keynoters as well as the panelists, Dr. Black, for the report. We truly appreciate you coming back this year. Also, I wanted to make sure I thank the BTW Summit as committee as well, and our technology department. They're always making sure that things are running smoothly on these days, and we want to make sure that we appreciate them in the way that they should be. This year, this 25th anniversary of the BTW Summit was something that we wanted to make sure was the intersection between the past, present, and the future. So for us, this summit was born out of the 1895 exposition speech by Booker T. Washington. It was developed by a concept paper by Dr. Ethel Pierce and Dr. Carl Montgomery. And from that, it began to be known as the Empowerment Summit. We wanted to make sure that we continue with the spirit of that particular inaugural event. And as we transition into the Economic Development Summit, and as we transition out of the the pandemic into more impactful work. We want to make sure that everybody took something from today and took something from the summit that they can use, some action items, some gems that they can implement into their own lives and into their own businesses that help and aid in their ability to be successful. And in closing, I just wanted to say that we hope that you guys will continue to support Tuskegee University and our other events that are coming. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Raymon Shange, and I want to just extend my thanks to Mr. Gary Walton and the entire summit committee. This is the second year that we've had a virtual summit, and at least from my perspective and folks that I've been talking to over the past 2 days, as well as the past year, they've been two great events. I apologize as I am driving. I have a 12:30 appointment.
Pending Raymon Shange, we do want to hear his remarks. I just had one overall statement. My goodness, after seeing this conference since its inception, I would have to say this was one of the best. It's done here virtually, but the quality of the presentations was so good. I sat and listened to every one, and what you couldn't help but compare what was different this year compared to previous years. And there was some similarity in some of the information presented, but clearly, because of the pandemic and the way people have had to switch to present virtually and market virtually and try to live in this society in a different way in the business world, there is a shift going on. And also I noted the youth of the presenters. Since I am an official elder now, I can appreciate your age group, those who presented between, say, late 20s, early 30s, up through 50s. There was a few old timers in the group, but your youth was going to carry us. You all are connected with the way the modern world is going forward. And I've noticed the variety and diversity amongst you, your panelists and your moderators. All of you have special gifts, and it seems like if collectively you could lead our people where we can have successful Black businesses. The struggle goes on all the time. Things work against Black businesses, against Black community. There's so much in our society, it's been that way since slavery, but you all seem to have ways to get around and about and above this. So I thank you. I want to thank again, Gary, you and your whole team, Miles, Barrett, Donald Mills, Gaynell Jackson, Nyesha Gordon, and then of course the IT team, Karen, Doug, Peter, and of course Raymond, who oversees all of it. I want to thank you for doing a really outstanding job of bringing together the moderators and the panelists who did such a great job. This was world class. It should have been seen nationally. And I hope that in the future, some kind of way, we can get the word out that this Booker T. Washington Summit is something to behold. God bless you and congratulations on a great, great conference.
I just want to make sure that we do thank our sponsors. Obviously, we know first and foremost, this is from the Hollow Tuskegee University. We want to make sure that we're always keeping that in mind. But in partnership with the Alabama Micro Enterprise Network, Regions Bank, Renaissance Bank, Truist, the Alabama Department of Commerce, AT&T, the National Business League, the Small Business Development Centers of Alabama, the University of West Alabama, Communities Unlimited, and the Black Belt Community Foundation. We appreciate all of you and all of your support.
I can hear you all. I'm not sure if you can hear me. Experiencing some of those broadband issues that were brought up earlier.
Okay, we can hear you now, sir. Go right ahead.
Okay. I feel like I did hear what was said, and I think that both Dr. Hill and Mr. Walton kind of rounded things out just the way they needed to be. The only thing that I would say any further is let's do this more often. There's obvious strength in the team that put this together. We have some great partnerships. My challenge to to us is to have 3 smaller events. We know the power of the networking capabilities throughout the pandemic, and we've shown that with some of our other programming and extension. It's only fitting that our community economic development team do more of this because the world needs you, as Dean Hill mentioned. And with that, I thank you all for attending and hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Dr. Shange.
Again, thank you all for your attending this program. We really do appreciate your coming, and God bless all of you. And with this, I'm going to close out the 25th Booker T. Washington Economic Development Summit. Thank you.